participants, I invite Professor Sheba S., the Assistant Director of International School for Sri Shankaracharya Studies.
Thank you, Ramya. Good evening to one and all. Respected speaker, Dr. Srinivasa Kumar Acharya, respected chair of this session, Dr. Shrikala Nair, senior professor, Dr. Ramakrishna Bhatta sir, other senior scholars, and my dear students, a warm good evening to one and all. The Sri Shankara Studies Circle, under the auspices of International School for Sri Shankaracharya Studies, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, is conducting its monthly program under the title Moola Grantha Padaha Vyakyacha with the support of great traditional scholars. Today, we are lucky to have an eminent young scholar, young traditional scholar, who is well-versed in philosophy, who is well-versed in Sanskrit, and also proficient in the emerging areas of Sanskrit, especially computational linguistics. Dr. Srinivasa Acharya is here to interpret a portion of the Pratyakṣa pariccheda of Dharmarājā Dhurendra's Vedānta paribhāṣā. It is my pleasure to introduce and welcome this young traditional scholar regarding his educational qualifications. Srinivasa Acharya has MA in Navya-Nyaya, MA in Alankara Shastra, and MA in Sanskrit. BLIC in Library and Information Science, PG Diploma in Tantra Shastra, Diploma in Computer Application, Certificate course in French and German. He pursued his PhD in Nyaya Philosophy at the Central Sanskrit University in New Delhi under the guidance of Professor, the stalwarts, Professor Prahlādācār, Professor Dr. Pandurange, and the present Vice Chancellor of Central Sanskrit University, Professor Srinivasa Vṛtti, and was awarded with PhD in Nyaya. Let me present some highlights of his major academic achievements. Dr. Srinivasa Kumar Acharya is currently the head of the Department of Philosophy at MAHE, where he oversees an interdisciplinary research project, Mahabharata Computational Analysis using Sanskrit Computational Linguistics in Digital Humanities. Srinivasa Kumar Acharya continues to serve the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence, Manipal Center for European Studies, Department of Languages, and Manipal Universal Press alongside Department of Philosophy since their inception. He is a beneficiary of the prestigious Erasmus Teaching Fellowship from the UCLM Spain in the year 2018 and was invited to deliver talks at the various European universities. He is also the co-recipient of the Indo-Canadian Shastri Grant with the University of Toronto, Canada, 2021-23 for the collaborative research on Indian dialectics and argumentation. Dr. Srinivasa Kumar Acharya had successfully completed two major projects, computational analysis of Mahabharata and Tatparya Nirnaya, as project head funded by Manipal University. And the second one is digitalizing and proving of Mahabharata Shastri Vavilla edition funded by Vedavyasa Samshodhana Kendra. Currently, he is actively involved in various ongoing international and national projects. The first one is Summer School on Ethics and Epics, Discourses on Morality, organized by Department of Philosophy, MAHE, with the British Council, UK. Next one, Grammatical Analysis of Mahabharata, Adi Parva, funded by Central Sanskrit University, New Delhi. And another one, Translating and Editing of Bhagavad Gita Bhashya and Bhagavad Gita Tatparya Nirnaya, to be published by Manipal University Press. I wholeheartedly welcome the veteran scholar, Dr. Srinivasa Kumar Acharya, to the text reading and interpretation session of Sri Shankara Studies Circle. Most welcome, sir. Dr. Shrikala Nair, Director ISSS, who is in charge of the Vice Chancellor of our university, is very busy with conducting the regular UG, PG examinations and the reappearance examinations of UG classes and the forthcoming entrance examinations of our university. Besides her hectic schedule, she is constantly and very minutely monitoring all the academic activities of our in the International School for Sri Shankaracharya Studies. On behalf of ISSS, I extend a cordial welcome to dear Srikala ma'am to chair this session. Thank you, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am. Sorry. The support of senior professors like Dr. Ramakrishna Bhatta sir, Professor Gidamani Amma teacher, and several scholars from various departments, various institutions, and other dignitaries are really a bless to the Sri Shankara Studies Circle. On behalf of ISSS, I extend a warm welcome to the senior professors, other distinguished scholars, and my dear students to this program. Once again, I welcome one and all. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, it's my pleasure to invite Professor Srikala Nair, the chair of today's session, to speak a few words.
Thank you, Ramya. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, you are.
Good enough. So, welcome to all the dignitaries and our young speaker, Dr. Srinivasa, Kumar and Acharya, whom we fondly call Srini, whose academic achievements are well narrated by my colleague Shiba here. In this young age, I mean, he should be a role model for the rest of the Sanskrit aspirants and academics. I'm so delighted to hear your CV, Dr. Srini. That should be, an inspiration for the rest of the young aspirants in the field. So a few words probably on what Sanskrit should be doing in the emerging academics and how we can use such young scholars, particularly for ISSS, International School for Sri Shankaracharya Studies. That is what I was thinking all through when my colleague Shiba was listing out his achievements. He seems to be a very useful academic as far as ISSS is concerned, because our concerns and his concerns do overlap quite a bit. And once the COVID is down and then we all start moving probably from the next academic year, you are most welcome, Srini, to our campus, and we look forward to have you with us. Yeah, as such, we are also planning to have a seminar organized, and we will definitely let you know. And to continue with what I was trying to tell you, what Sanskrit has got to do in this emerging nation. Now, we all know that the developed countries began to look up at the Asian countries for solutions on how to live, what should be the approach to nature, what should be the goal of our life, and several such things. What science should be doing, how science should be working, etc., etc. And as yesterday, Professor Billy Moria has beautifully said that let not Indian philosophy be an archive of knowledge where we just collect fundas of knowledge and we just say that it is just a treasure and then we just sit on top of it and we don't do anything other than that. So here you have young scholars who, take them in hand and then make them contextualized and then progress it. This has been our tradition. Unless, as in some other occasion, I was telling Professor Arindam that I would like to have the analogy of Indian philosophy not as a stagnant water. It should be a flowing river. And the analogy of this river fulfills multiple purposes. What a river does is it changes the place where it runs or flows. You know that when a river started flowing, the shores assume different forms, and it also takes different forms in different regions. The river in a mountain looks different from a river on a samatal, a straight place. So these two ways in which the river influences the human life seem to be a proper analogy of what a philosophy should be doing. So it should be a flowing river, taking all that it has, but then evolving, taking different forms. That is what I meant by contextualizing. And in order to contribute towards this, ISSS has taken a step ahead by reading the text. As my colleague said, Moola Grantha Pratyakṣa is one program, I think, which is a flagship academic event of not only ISSS but of the whole of the university, because I can't think of a better activity than reading the text. Reading the text and interpreting. There can't be any better academic activity, as we all know. So this evening, Srini will be reading for us Vedānta paribhāṣā of Dharmarājā, as Shiba has already told you. We all know Vedānta paribhāṣā. Very often it surfaces as one of the textbook, as in the case of our Vedanta department. It is one of the, at least portions of it will become the textbook for the master student all over India, I presume. And particularly it has been focused for the epistemological underpinnings of Advaita Vedanta, particularly from the Vivarana school. As I was going through the preface of Madhavananda Swami's English translation, he himself concedes that the first 6 chapters where the Pramana has been discussed from the Advaita point of view is a bit abstruse for the beginner. But he says that once, and why this is abstruse? Because of this polemical nature of the narrative, where, the thick or intense arguments has been presented, arguments and counter-arguments as also refutations, particularly with the Nyaya Vaisheshika school, which Advaita position against the Nyaya Vaisheshika. That makes, the arguments very intense and thick, and therefore it's abstruse for particularly a beginner. But once he has ascended these rather rugged steps, says the author, what awaits him is green pastures of Vedanta proper. That has been discussed in the last 2 chapters. Now, we know that Vedanta theory of perception is pitched in sharp contrast with the popular Nyaya Vaisheshika positions, particularly when pure consciousness has been brought in to play significant role in the exercise of perception, and that is probably what makes perception, the procedure, the process of perception itself is being distinctly noticed or specified as far as Advaitins are concerned. Now, the importance of the text is known to all, and it has been testified by the number of commentaries written on it, like Vedanta Shikhamani, Vedanta Maniprabha, Arthadivika, Vedanta Paribhāṣā Prakāṣika, and also Ananta Krishna Shastri's the latest was Paribhāṣā Prakāṣika. Now, if you read the very first chapter, it's very interesting. In the initial shlokas, he tributes his masters, and then he says, Tena bodhaya mandana vedartha vedandardha avalambani Dharmarājā dhurindrena paribhāṣā vidanyada. He says that it is for the mandas, for the dull-headed, it is for the dull or low-pitched people that he is writing this text. I'm also reminded of, I think it was in Indian Council of Philosophical Research, when somebody was referring to Tarka Sangraha, they were saying, Balanam Sukhabodhaya Kriyate Tarka Sangraha. And then someone who is not very well versed with Indian philosophy was saying that, oh, this is meant for Bala, then what about the scholarly literature? It ought to be very, very high. So this definitely can't be for the mandas or the dull-headed, as the humility of the author probably is what makes him reported like this. The intense text, as we are shortly going to hear from the horse's own mouth, will tell you the density of the subject that has been presented and the intensity of the argumentation. So I don't want to stay in between the speaker, the and also the listeners. Looking forward to have a wonderful discussion after the reading of the text. Now over to the speaker, Srini. Thank you so much. I think you can, yeah.
श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम् ऊष्टापिदानानकुली धन्दै परिवृतापविः सर्वस्यै वाचैशाना चारुमामि हवादये लक्ष्मीनारायणौ वन्दे ब्रह्मवायु तथैव च गायत्रीं भारतीं वन्दे वैष्णवान् तत्त्ववादिनः आचार्यः पवनोऽस्माकम् आचार्याणि च भारती देवो नारायण श्रीशा देवी मङ्गलदेवता तपस्वाध्याय शुश्रूषा कृष्णपूजारतं मुनिं विश्वेशमिष्टदं वन्दे परिव्राट् चक्रवर्तिनम्. Let me do the Mangalacharanam of Vedanta Paribhāṣā text and then start. Yada vidya vilasena bhuta bhautika srishtayah tam naumi paramatmanam satchidananda vigraham yadante vasi panchasyir nirasta bhedivaranaha tam pranaumi nrisimhakyam yatindram paramam gurum Srimad Venkatanathakhyan Velanguli Nivasinaha Jagadguru Naham Vande Sarvatantra Pravartakan येन चिंता मनोटीका दशटीका विभंजिनी तर्कचूड़ामणिर्नाम कृता विद्वन् मनोरमा टीका शशधरस्यापि बालव्युत्पत्तिदायिनी पदयोजनया पंचपादिका व्याकृता तथा तेन बोधाय मंदानां वेदांतार्थावलंबिनी धर्मराजाध्वरीन्द्रेण परिभाषा वितन्यते. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Sri Shankara Study Circle, International School for Sri Shankara Acharya Studies. I think it is triple S. Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kaladi, Kerala. What the virtual world has done, even though I am sitting in Udupi, the citadel of Dvaita philosophy, where Madhvacharya was born, Ananda Tirtha was born, who propagated Dvaita philosophy. Sitting from Udupi, I am interacting with the scholars who are in Kaladi, where it is the birthplace, said to be the birthplace of Shankaracharya. So, Udupi, an Arabian coast, where Krishna is the one who is ornamenting the city, and I am connecting with Shankara from Madhvacharya's birthplace and connecting with Shankaracharya's birthplace. This is one great adventure the virtual world has gifted us. I am not a Advaita scholar or even a beginner, though I have had occasions to study Advaita under great scholars, and I even teach Advaita epistemology. But by training so far, I am trained in Nyaya and Dvaita, particularly my bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Everything is in Nyaya. So, in both the sense, whether by being trained in Dvaita household and Dvaita traditional Gurukula, and also academically speaking in Nyaya, both are opponents of Advaita. So now I have to become my own opponent by so far and then speak on behalf of Shankara. But of course, whether philosophically there might be different standpoints among all these schools, one cannot forget the contributions of Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada. I'm in my mid-30s, and Shankaracharya did not, he lived for around 42 years.
32.
And and 788 to 820 Common Era. So in the 8th and 9th century, within 40 years, what he has done, I mean, we are struggling to get certain articles, book chapters, books published, but we are unable to decode, interpret, and work with his text. That is the contribution the one who has done. And Shankaracharya has not only done philosophical, intellectual contributions, his social contributions, cultural contributions, mapping the whole India, different parts of India itself is a significant. I mean, we might have not understood if there was no Shankaracharya, what would have been India, whether there was India or not. So this is a great accomplishment that he, because of his divinity, he could do it and and become a lighthouse for all of us to see where we have to reach, where we have to go. Now, in that sense, uh, the as though Professor Shrikala pointed it out, even though it said beginners, the beginners here do not mean Bala or Mandad. They do not mean like us. They are Grahana Dharana Patuhu, the one who is capable of comprehending Grahana and Dharana, retention, the one who is capable of retaining. So whatever we discuss here, we comprehend, understand them, and once we go back, after the Shramana, once we go back, we could do Manana because of the Dharana, retention. So we should be able to do that. And not just we are able to listen, understand, and then retain, but also Adita Kavya Vyakarana Koshadiman, the one who has read all the literature, the one who has read all the linguistics, the one who has read all the Sanskrit lingual, has good exposure to Sanskrit language, philosophical language. So in this sense, that is the manda that they are referring to. So in this sense, this text Vedānta paribhāṣā is not merely a text for a beginners at school level or at a bachelor's level. It's a text of master's level, as Professor Shrikala pointed out. So what we are doing at Manipal, we are offering a master's in philosophy and Sanskrit, two masters in philosophy and masters in Sanskrit. In that, we have, in philosophy, we have something called epistemology. So in epistemology, what we are doing is that for the second semester, all the three Vedanta texts, Yatindra Mata Deepika of Srinivasa Dasa from Vishishtadvaita, Vedanta Paribhāṣā of Dharmarājā Dvarindra from Advaita, and Pramana Paddhati of Sri Jayatirtha from Dvaita are being taught. So it's a very important step that we have to take up, teaching the text. At the same time, as it was pointed out in the chair's remark, it should not be a stagnant water, it should be a flowing river. So there should be a lot of not just archiving the language, the rich content, but also how we could take help of them and reinterpret them, and in simple words, make use of them. So then it becomes philosophy. Philosophy is basically the love of wisdom, the application of the knowledge that we have attained through these texts. So if we are unable to apply, we are just listening to lectures and then there is no nididhyasana, there is no there is jnana, after that there is no karma, then there is a huge gap. So hope all our endeavors to in future, as it has been so far in the past in several cases, but at the same time there has been a long gap, but again we are attempting the same. So hope this will continue for so long and we would be successful in our ventures. Now, what is Vedanta paribhāṣā? Vedanta paribhāṣā, Vedanta, Vedasya Antaha. So the modern scholars interpret Vedasya Antaha as the last section of Vedas, but the traditional scholars interpret, they don't have issues with that translation, but the limiting the term to that translation, they have problems with. So they say that it is not just Vedasya Antaha, Vedasya Saraha. So it is the quintessence of Vedas, not merely the essence of Vedas. So Vedanta means the quintessence of Vedanta. Paribhāṣā means meta language. Though Professor Srinivasa Vṛtti, Professor Dr. Srinivasa Vṛtti, my mentor and PhD co-guide, and also the Vice Chancellor of Central Sanskrit University, He says paribhāṣā is not meta language, it's a restricted language. Paricchina bhāṣā paribhāṣā. Yes, of course it is. But meta language is also about a very technical register. There is a registry of technicalities. Within the technical registry, the language operates. So in that sense also, both, whether it's a restricted language or meta language, both play a significant role in the way we redefine the term. So it's a meta language of the Vedanta. So it's an epistemological meta language of Vedanta. That is what Vedanta paribhāṣā means. Vedanta arthavalambini paribhāṣā. And the language that Dharmarājā has used, he has used in a very specific sense of Vedantasya arthasya avalambini. So what is the meaning of the Vedanta text, the quintessence of Veda, as Sri Shankaracharya has pointed out? So along in that lines, Dharmarājā has taken the text ahead. So I'm not going to spend the times on the Mangalacharanam. Dharmarājā Dwarindra and his life, I'm not going to speak about because I have very limited time, and then the text is big. So I'll directly take into the text. So I'm referring to the translation that Professor Shrikala also pointed out, Madhavananda's Advaita Ashrama of Sri Ramakrishna Math, Kolkata. So that English translation I'm referring to. I also have other Sanskrit texts, but I will be referring to this one. And I have kept it as a cāturvidhyāntam because I will cover a lot of portions from that part in my discussions, but pankti by pankti, line by line, it's not possible to do that in half an hour. So now, what is the point of Vedanta? What is Vedanta? So Dharmarājā has very nicely in the Iha Kalo Dharmartha Moksha Keshu Cāturvidha Purushartheshu section, he has very nicely pointed it out. See, some people do not believe. The entire Indian philosophy is split into two. Those who believe in Veda as testimony, those who do not believe. And even those who believe Veda as testimony, among them also it is two. Those who believe Veda as personal and those who believe Veda as impersonal. Even among those who believe Veda as impersonal, they are also split into two, Dvaita again. That is, those who believe only Karma Jnana Kanda and those who emphasize only on Karma Kanda and Veda as injunctive, and another one as Veda as Brahma Jnana Para. Again, in Brahma Jnana Para also, Veda, they are also again two. Those who believe, those who are the varied versions of Advaita, those who say that there is only one Tattva, whereas there is another school of thought that there is, say, there is not Veda. Brahma means yes one, but the other entities are different from Brahma, so there are many entities in the world. So there is Veda Pramanyavadinaha, Veda Pramanyavadinaha, Veda Pramanyavadishwapi, Veda Purushetvavadinaha, Veda Purushetvavadinaha, Veda Purushetvavadishwapi, Karma Kanda Paraha, Brahma Jnana Paraha, Brahma Jnana Pareshwapi, Brahmasya Jivaikyam Vadantaha, Jiva Vedam Vadantaha, iti evam. We can see Dvaita Paksha in the whole Indian philosophy when we are looking into this. So what is Vedanta? Vedanta is, as Brahma Sutra of Krishna Dvaipayana, Vedavyasa has pointed out, Atato Brahma Jignasa. So enough done with a lot of other things. Let's start now to do what is Brahma. Janmadhyasya yataha, Tattva Samanvaya, Shastra Yonitva. So that Brahma Jnana comes from Shastra Gamya. Okay. Now how that will happen? Samanvaya, Tattva Samanvaya. So Samanvaya has to happen. So if we have to do that Samanvaya to know Brahma, cognize Brahma, realize Brahma, then we need proper epistemological tools to deal with this ontological entity. So that is why Vedanta is needed, is what he has pointed out at the beginning. Now, see, every individual, Shankaracharya in his Sarva Vedanta Lakshana Sangraha, he has told every individual, no one, this verse, Prayojanam Anuddishya Namandopi Pravartate, is Shankaracharya's own verse. So there is no one in this world that will do anything without any purpose. Okay, it's not a utilitarian model exactly, it's a little different model. So we will not engage with anything if there is no purpose. So what is the purpose? The four main purposes are Trivarga and Apavarga, Dharmartha, Kama and Moksha. Dharmartha, Kama are only, they are anitya, as the Vedas themselves point out, and the nitya, Paramanitya, is Moksha. So, the one who goes there, as the Brahma Sutra itself says, Anavritti Shabda, they don't come back. Okay. So it's a world where we reach to that height and never come back. What happens in Brahmajnana? I'm not going to point out other texts. Let's get into Advaita. So this is what Tatra Pramakaranam Pramanam. So what is that Prama? Okay. Prama is that, see what Shankaracharya did. I said that his contributions are significant. So he looked at India from east, like in Pratyakṣa, east, south, west, and north. So he was born in south, and then he left the world in north. Okay, from Kaladi to Kedara. So his maternal house is Melpalattur Mana in Veliyanad, and his paternal house is Kaladi. So in either of these places he is born. So from Kaladi to Kedara, and again he did a peregrination. He circumambulated the whole India, east Puri, south Sringeri, also Kanchi, and then west Dwaraka, and north. In all these Chaturamnaya Pita, he representing 4 Vedas and representing 4 cardinal points of India. Okay, the cartographic. He was a cartographer. He could map without any Air India, Vistara, Jet Airways. He just walked. Okay, and he could see. He had that picture of the whole India. With his 4 disciples, that is Hasta Malaka, Sureshwar Acharya, who was earlier Mandala Mishra, Padmapada, and Totaka. He established this in these 4 cardinal points, 4 important vakyas from the Upanishad, Vedanta. That is what Vedanta Artha Avalambini. Vedanta Artha means that Aham Brahma, Prajnanam Brahma from Rigveda, Aitareya Upanishad, and Aham Brahmasmi from Yajurveda, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Tattvamasi from Samaveda, Chandogya Upanishad or Chandogya Upanishad, and then Ayam Atma Brahma from Atharva Veda, Mandukya Upanishad. So from these 4 Upanishads, he took these 4 Mahavakyas. Prajnanam Brahma. It was also the motto. It is the motto of Manipal University. Prajnanam Brahma. Consciousness is Brahma. Awareness is Brahma or God or whatever. So Brahma is consciousness. That spiritual awaken, being spiritually awakened, is what Prajnana is. That Prajnana is what he is referring to, Dharmarājā, as Prama. What is that Prajnanam? That is nothing but the Jnana itself, the cognition, the wisdom itself is Brahma. It's not like Nayayika say, Atma has Jnana through Samavaya Sambandha. No, Atma is Jnana. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. And who is that Brahma? So that Brahma is different, I am different. No, Aham Brahmasmi. So that Brahma and I, we both are the same. We both are the same. Here it has a very different meaning. Of course, the Neo Vedanta and many different versions of Advaita, all of them have interpreted this Aham Brahmasmi very, very differently. Today it has a lot of sociological sense than the conservative conventional sense. So I am that, similar to what the God said to Moses in Bible. And Tattvamasi, you are that. Tattvam Asi. Ayam Atma Brahma. This everything here. Neha Nanasti Kinjana. There is nothing that is Nana here. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Everything is Brahma. So then how am I seeing this, the world, differently? It is because my perception is deluding me. My perception is deceiving me. So that is why we have to discuss Pratyakṣa. So I am engaging with the world as it is different from me, but actually in reality it is nothing but the same. So this is what he says, Pramakaranam Pramanam. This Prama, this Prajna is Smriti Vyavritta. because there was no earlier cognition for us to recall it. This is what Vedanta is teaching us. That is why Vedanta is not stating the obvious. Vedanta is giving something that is new information, new knowledge. That is why this knowledge is, according to Dharmarājā, this knowledge is anadigata abhaditartha visheka jnana. Anadigata. It is not cognized earlier by us. It's not understood by us. We are, because of Shankaracharya coming to us, because of this whole parampara coming to us, this Vedanta we are able to engage. If there was no Shankaracharya, Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam. So it would have been really difficult for us to engage with all this Bhakti Parampara, the Veda, the Smriti, and the entire Itihasa Purana, the Panchama Veda. So he referred to these texts and reinterpreted them for us, because there has been a long gap after Vedavyasa and Shankaracharya. Abhadita, and it's an irrefutable cognition. It's not a cognition that where you can refute this. No, this is all rubbish. No, it is not that. This is neither Smriti and it is also Anadigata Abhadita Artha Visheka Jnana. This Jnana, cognition, is called Prama. Prama means knowledge. So sometimes we do translate it as knowledge as right knowledge and wrong knowledge. But the Western philosophers, because given their classical account of knowledge, justify true belief, they look at it, Anglo-American worldview looks at it a little different. They say that there is no wrong knowledge. Knowledge means Prama. So there might be understanding and misunderstanding. Jnana can be two things. But Jnana is not knowledge. Jnana subtype is knowledge. So knowledge means Prama. So Yathartha Jnana is knowledge, not merely Jnana. Jnana is of two types. Anubhava, Smriti. Again, they are of two types. Nayayika conception only. That is of Yathartha, Ayathartha. Yathartha is of four types according to Nayayika, but according to Shankaracharya, because Vyavahare Bhattanayaha, so as Kumarila Bhatta also has conceived, it is of 6 types. That is what he says in the next coming paragraph. Tanicha Pramanani Shat. So it is 6 types. So here there are 2 things that Dharmarājā Dwarindra has pointed it out. I'm not going to skip a lot of things because they are very interesting. So if cognition has to be something that is not cognized earlier, then Dharavahika Jnana is also a Jnana. But if you are saying that it is not Prama, Prama definition is Anadigata Abhaditartha Visheka Jnana. In Dharavahika Buddhi, it is also always Adhigata. See, Jnana is Dikshanavasthai. Every cognition stays for 2 moments. And my mind is like that. I jump around the whole world. Even while speaking to you, I was thinking a lot of things. So I think every individual might be like that or may not be. So whenever I'm looking at the screen or my own image, or I'm searching for where is the camera, where is the book, and so on, every second, every 2 seconds, I'm producing different types of sets of cognition. This cognition, when I'm looking at this object, let's assume that there is this phone. I'm looking at this phone. This happens to everyone in every second of life. That is why this is a very practical conception. So I'm looking at this phone and I'm cognizing it, and I'm storing it in my memory cells in the brain, and that memory cell is constantly helping me to, because the input, the scientifically speaking, the input is going to my brain and coming back. Okay, so brain is processing the visual input. Now, in this Dharavahika Jnana, which is serial, I'm looking at it constantly. So now it's already Adhigata. So then how the second or this next set of cognition can be Prama? Here, he also interestingly says, Nirupasyapi kalasya indriya vedyatva abhyupagamena. Even though Kala can be Nirupa like Akasha, but Kala is considered to be perceived, not inferred like Nayayika. Kala is Sakshi Vedya in Vedanta. So Kala, because is being perceived, Kala is seen. Okay, we are seeing the time. So Pratyakṣa, how Kala is perceived? See, if you say that I don't perceive Kala, I don't see time, I only infer time based on the sun or clock, looking at the the mullu, whatever the digital analog structure of the object. I'm looking at them and then I'm inferring the time, or I'm looking at the sun or the seasons and moon and then I'm inferring the time. No, the moment I say you are, I am, that am, it has a meaning called lat lakara, vartamanarte lat. So without knowing vartamana, how can I use that? So anyone, every moment you feel I am living now. Okay, cogito ergo sum. So that cogito, so that you in your interaction, any language, given language, that you would refer to the time. So the time, because you perceive it, you refer to it. It's a very interesting observation. So, and in Dharavahika Jnana, what happens? Every second is changing, like the Buddhist conception of time or the object in their conception, but it is very explicit. Every second there is a change. The time is moving. So in that sense, the tatta kshana vishesha vishayakatvena. So the kshana is not perceived. So the moment is not perceived. The new moment is there. So in that case, this is not avyapti, is not at all there. Avyapti is, you can either call it under pervasion or under application of the definition. Okay. So now this is kincha siddhante. So he says this is from the point of view of Mimamsa, but from the point of view of Advaita, it is not at all different sets of cognition in the serial cognition. It is just only one cognition. See, until you have the cognition that is going to either you change the topic or you're going to refute the topic. Until then, it's considered as one cognition. So, in that sense also, it's only one cognition. So, you have not already perceived the cognition prior. So, it's not at all adhigata jnana, it's anadhigata jnana only. So, in that sense also, there is no avyapti. Now, there is an interesting question. In Advaita, every neha nanasti kinchana. So, Brahma jnana comes and everything is sublated, badita. So in that case, what to do? So he says, even after Brahma Sakshatkara, until Brahma Sakshatkara, until the transactional reality. So when it comes to Vyavaharika Satya, when it comes to transactional reality, Advaita almost functions like Dvaita or even Vishishta Dvaita. So they do not consider that. So the Shankaracharya himself has proposed bhakti movement and karma movement and so on, and his mata and his parampara is also doing it. So this entire karma is a path towards jnana. So it's path towards jnana. So until Brahma Sakshatkara, they are literally real Vyavaharika Sat. Okay, so in that sense, Vyavaharika Sattadashayam to na badaha tasmat abhadita is also not a problem. Now he says there are shat pramanas, Pratyakṣa, Anumana, Upamana, Agama, Arthapatti, Anupalabdhi. So this Arthapatti, Nayayikas and Vishishtadvaita and Dvaita, Sankhya, Yoga, Vyakarana, Ayurveda, all these people they consider as Vyatireka Anumana, Kevala Vyatireka. But here they consider it as Buddhism, sorry, Kumarila Bhatta and just give me a minute. in they consider it as Vitreka Anumana, and Anupalabdhi, they consider it as Pratyakṣa only. But Kumarila Bhatta, Prabhakara Mishra, and Shankara Sadvaita, they consider this as two independent pramanas and not include them in the 4 pramanas. So Pratyakṣa is perception, Anumana is inference, Agama, Upamana is analogy, Agama is language or verbal testimony. So language that they are referring to is the verbal testimony, the testimonial language, not the Prataraka Vakya, but the Apta Vakya. Arthapatti is the postulation or presumption, and Anupalabdhi is the cognition of non-availability. So in that, what is Pratyaksha Pramayaha Karanam? Pramayaha Karanam Pramana. Pratyaksha Pramayaha Karanam Pratyaksha Pramanam. Pratyaksha Pramanama Anadigata Abaditartha Smriti Vyavritta Anadigata Abaditartha Jnanam. Sacha Pratyaksha Prama Tat Chaitanya Meva. Tattu Chaitanya Bhinnam na Advaita Mate. So Chaitanyam nama kim? Tat Chaitanyam tavat, it isn't it anadi. Now Pratyaksha, what happens when I look at someone new? Okay, if you have a novel object in front of you and you look at that novel object, the cognition is produced now. If you say this Pratyaksha Prama, Indriyartha Sannikarshan Janyam Jnanam Pratyaksham. So Indriya and Artha, because of their Sannikarsha, this Jnana has been produced. Indriya, it's a little, there is a little difference that I will come to that part now. Now, if this cognition, anyhow, it's produced, it's now new. But Chaitanya is Anadi, it is Nitya, eternal. Then how can you say it, Pratyaksha Prama is Chaitanya only? So what he says, yes, of course, Chaitanya is Nitya, because in Advaita, Shadasmakam Anadayaha. So, Vishuddha Chit, pure consciousness, Shuddha Chaitanya is Anadi. But in Chaitanyasya Anaditvepi, Tadabhivyanjaka Antakarana Vṛttihi Indriya Sannikarshadina Jayate. So, Indriya Sanni, even though Chaitanya, Shuddha Chaitanya is Nitya, Vishuddha Chita is Anadi Nitya, but Vishishta Chaitanya, Vṛtti Vishishta Chaitanya, Antakarana Parinama Vishishta, qualified with Antakarana Parinama, Vṛtti. Antakarana Parinama is Vṛtti. That Chaitanya is not Anadi Nitya, that is just now born because of Indriya Sanikarsha. Now there is a question. If you say Antakarana Parinama, Vṛtti nama Antakarana Parinama. So internal modification. Antakarana, Antaha, inner. Karana, faculty. Inner faculty, Antakarana. Parinama, modification. Inner faculty modifying into something else. Okay, then you perceive it. If you say it's a modification, Parinama, Antakarana is Niravayava. Then how can you say it's... so for that, he says, Natavad Antakaranam Niravayava. It is not Niravayava. It is not that it does not have any Avayava. It is Dravya. In Advaita Vedanta, it is Dravya and it is Savayava. It has Avayava. Even in Nayayika also, Sukha Dukkha Dupalabdhi Sadhanam Indriyam Manaha. But Manaha, there, it's Anuparimana and it does not have Avayava. But here, it has Avayava. Saditvancha Tanmano Asrujata. But how do you say Manas is it's Nitya? But how do you say it's born? Because Shruti says, Shruti itself is Pramana here. Tanmanaha Asrujataha. So the revelation of the seer, the one who sees, the seer. So the seer has seen it as it is born. And they also have said, and all this Vṛtti Rupa Jnana, everything is Manodharma, Antakarana Parinama. How come? Even the Shruti itself says, Kamaha, Sankalpaha, Vichikitsa, Shraddha, Ashraddha, Dhritihi, Adhritihi, Hrihi, Dihi, Bihi, Ityetat Sarvam, Dihi. So Ityetat Sarvam Manayeva, Etat Sarvam, Vṛtti Jnanam Manaha Eva. And also not just Vṛtti Jnana is Manaha, even the Kamadihi. Kama is also Manaha only. Oh, you are saying Kama is Manaha. But actually, perception everyone has, the anubhava everyone has is aham ichchami, aham janami. So I like. So what I am doing here is that there is akyata pratyaya, that is mip. That akyata pratyaya, mip, is uttama purusha, pratama ekavachana. So it means I. So bibemi, janami, ichchami is I. So it's referring to whom? The soul, the self, I. Because soul has a religious connotation, so the modern scholars, to keep philosophical discourses secular, so they do not use the term soul and they make use of the term self. But actually, the term Atma refers to the self only. Because if you look at Sanskrit literature, Atma, Atma Tanuhu, in the whole Ramayana, Mahabharata, everywhere, in all other literatures, the word Atma, so Atma is used as mind, okay, self. So Atma means self. So either way, if you want to keep, because it's a polysemous word, it has multiple meanings. So it depends on the reinterpretation that you would like to refer to. So in that sense, Sanskrit is a very elastic language. So unless there is bada. Right. So ichchami is referring to the self. So aham pratyaya vishaya, that is Atma. Then you are saying it is not aham pratyaya vishaya, it's mano pratyaya vishaya. So the topic that is being considered, the cognitive content here is manaha and not Atma. So it's Pratyakṣa pramana virodha. So he says, no. See, if you are drinking a hot water in a glass, the glass will be cold. The water, when it's boiled, it becomes hot. So the water's nature is cool by nature. Shita sparshavatyaha apaha. But what happens? Because of the heat molecule samsparsha, it becomes hot, and the utensils also become hot. So what you say, the utensil is hot. Actually, the heat molecules that are on the top of the utensil is hot, not the object itself. Despite that, what you say, that is hot. Similarly, here, even though aham is not referring to the soul, it is actually referring to the manaha. It is actually referring to the manaha, but still you consider, because it is manaha is so connected to the soul, you are thinking you are the point of it. You are not actually point of it, because you are nirguna, you are nirakara. So adhyasat, aikya adhyasat, because we consider I means I am, though there is, because of that adhyasa, aikya adhyasa, so I am considered false identification with the self. So I am considering it, that is I is the content. Now you said what you said before, Indriya. Now, and here earlier you said it's Indriya. Now you are saying that manaha is Indriya. Now you are saying that manaha is Indriya and Indriya is Pratyakṣa Vishaya. But Indriyas are by nature Atindriya. What you see here, everyone has it. Even a blind individual will have it. What you have here is actually the physical object, not the Indriya, what we consider as a sensory organ. This is physical object. Everything what we perceive is physical object. Indriya is the one that is very, very sukshma, subtle. It's Atindriya. It's only Anameya or Agama Vedya. So, and your Atindriya, Paroksha Vishaya Indriya, you are imperceptible Indriyas are, and you are saying it's now Pratyakṣa Vishaya, Aham Ichchami Ityadi Pratiti, Mano Vishaya, Manaha Indriya Pratyakṣa Vishaya. So he says, he refers to, and then the Pramana is Manashashtani Indriyani Vishayanupasevate. So, Mana is the sixth Indriya. So he says, your interpretation of these texts are a problem. Manashashtani Indriyani means not Manaha as the sixth Indriya. If I say, Vedāna Adhyapayamasa Mahabharata Panchaman, means Vedas were taught including the fifth Mahabharata. Fifth Mahabharata doesn't mean fifth Veda. Fifth Mahabharata means fifth something that is included along with Vedas, the Chatur Vedas. Similarly, Yajamana Panchama Ida Bhakshayanti, including the fifth Yajamana, including the fifth, that is Yajamana. The fifth is not referring to the priest here. Fifth is referring to the individual who is doing the yaga, the Yajamana. So in that sense, it is not at all speaking anything about the it's not even in Manashashta and Indriyani also, it is not saying that including the Manas, it's sixth Indriya, it's saying Indriyas including the sixth Manas. So it is all about interpreting, and I am not doing this. See, when we are speaking about citation and references in the 21st, 22nd, 20th century, as if it is given by the modern day worldview. No, exactly not. Shankaracharya, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, they are all from 9th, 11th and 13th centuries. 12th and 13th century, 11th and 13th century. And even Vedānta, Dharmarājā, he is from 17th century. He is citing everything. He is saying, I am not saying something new. I am citing the Vedic worldview. So according to Veda, even the Upanishad, Gita Upanishad, even there it is told Indriyabhya Parahyartaha. Artha, objects are above Indriya. Arthebhyascha Param Manaha. Manaha is above Artha. So now Indriya is at the bottom level. So it is not, if Manas is also an Indriya, then it would have been the same. Now the point here, what he is making, earlier he said, Manaha is Sadidravya. He did not say Indriya. I think in my interpretation I said Manaha is Indriya. No, Manaha is not Indriya. Because in Advaita there are two schools. One is Shankaracharya's direct disciple, who is Padmapada, in his Vivarana Prasthana. So Vedanta Paribhāṣā follows the Vivarana Prasthana. So, and even the one Acharya which is referred to by Dharmarājā here is referring to Padmapada's follower Prakashatmayati. So according to the Vivarana Prasthana, Manaha is not considered as Indriya in this Vivarana school. However, Vachaspati Mishra's Bhamati school, in that school, Manaha is considered as Indriya, but also because of Vachaspati Mishra is said Darshanacharya, so he has stronger Nyaya influence also. He has considered, like Vishitadvaita and Dvaita, he has considered all the texts are Parama Pramana. All the Shastras are Parama Pramana. It's not like Nyaya is Pramana and Nyaya is a Pramana, Mimamsa is a Pramana, Vedanta is Pramana. No. It's very explicit in Yathindranatha Deepika and Ramanuja's tradition and Dvaita tradition. All the texts are Parama Pramana. All the sutras are Parama Pramana. All the schools of thought are Parama Pramana. Unless they have Badhita Vishaya. The only part where they have Badhita Vishaya, that part has to be excluded. Abadhita Vishaya, we are totally fine with them. We are not like always arguing with them, against them. We don't have any personal agenda against them. So, now if Manaha is not an Indriya, then how come Sukha Dukkha Dvipalabdhi Sadhanam Indriyam Manaha? Sukhadi Pratyakṣa, how can Manas have it? It can have it. There is not a problem. But how can it become Sakshat? Because Sakshat, Indriya Janya Jnanam, so if Indriyartha Sannikarsha Janyam Jnanam Pratyaksham, that Indriyartha Sannikarsha Janyam Jnanam means Sakshat, direct. Here, if it is Manaha is not an Indriya, then Sukha Pratyaksha will not become direct. Then how it will be Pratyaksha? So, he is saying, Indriya Janyatvena Jnanasya Sakshatvam Nasti. Anumityaderapi Manojanyataya Sakshatva Pattehe. Like Anumiti is directly perceived, not perceived, cognized by Manaha, but directly cognized by Manaha. Similarly, this also can be considered as directly perceived, that there is no problem at all. And Ishvara Jnanasya Anindriya Janya Jnanasya Sakshatva Anapattesha. It's a very interesting argument that counter argument. If you say Ishvara Jnana is not Indriya Janya Jnana. It's Swarupa Jnana. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. So then that he does not have Sakshat Jnana. What? So there is no problem at all. Now, I will be doing a very important part of Advaita perception, and then I will try to conclude if the time is not permitting. So now the major difference between Advaita and others. So there is the subject self, Pramatra, and there is the Antakarana and then Bahirindriya. That is Antaramana, Bahirmana. That is connected with. Pramata is connected with Antaramana. Antaramana is connected with Bahirmana. Bahirmana is connected with Bahirartha. Pratyakṣa is produced. This is in case of Bahirartha. Pramatra is connected with Antaramana, and Antaramana is connected with Antarartha. This is in case of internal perception and external perception. This is how Pratyakṣa functions. And they are all directly connected. If they are directly connected, that means it's perception. If there is Desha Vyavadana, Kala Vyavadana, Vastu Vyavadana in x-axis or y-axis, in vertical axis or temporal axis, then we do not have access to our past and the future, so it's not perception. But in case of Yogi Jnana, it is perception only because they have direct access to the past and the future. And in case of God also. Now, look at the, so now he's here, the Advaita, this Antaramana is of 4 types. Cāturvidhyāntam is 4 types. Actually, it's 5 types according to Bhagavata Purana. Vedānta paribhāṣā says 4 types. Is it contradicting with Bhagavata Purana? Not at all. The 4th one has been considered, the 5th one has been considered as an extension of the 4th one. So there is no problem. So what are they? One, wherever we have dilemma that's caused by the doubt, mind, and also the emotion. So the emotional quotient, and wherever we have dilemma. And to decide that dilemma, to make a decision, we need decision-making authority. That is the rational entity. That is buddhi, intellect. And then we have is ahankara, mamata jnana. So see, if I sleep tonight and tomorrow I wake up and then I go out and I don't, instead of using my own brush to brush my teeth, I will use someone else's brush. Does that happen? No, I will use my own toothbrush. Why? Because I have that mamata buddhi. Mamata buddhi is not always bad. Over mamata buddhi is bad. Not all the mamata buddhi is bad. If instead of being in my house, if I go to someone else's house, it's going to be really a problem. So mamata buddhi, ahankara is not at all bad. False ego is bad. Or over pride is bad. Mada is bad. Mamata buddhi is needed. If not, how would I know this is my phone? If not, I will invade into someone's privacy. So that is ahankara, mine. Where what is mine, what is not mine. That is also helped by the memory quotient. And then for that I need chitta. That is the memory quotient. Look at all this interesting cognitive science of consciousness that the Ityasa Purana Parampara has presented, and how the whole Vedanta Parampara, Vishishta Advaita, Dvaita and Advaita have taken that, referred to that, and have catapulted into, have elongated and have created that vast intellectual reserve for us to understand the word. Okay. Now, these are the 4 vrittis, Antakarana Parinama. And then the Bahirindriya 5, you know, Shrotram Chakshus Parshanancha, Rasanam Granam Evacha, Alvishtaya Manaschayam, Vishayanopasevate. Manashashtani Indriyani, Prakritistani Karshati. So now this, you have this 5 Indriyas. So that is the Bahirmana. And then you have the Bahirartha. Now, according to Advaita, what we have to very carefully remember here, according to Vedanta paribhāṣā, is that this Pramatra is not Atma. This Pramatra is Antakarana. So, Pratyakṣa Chaitanya, Pratyakṣa Pramachatra Chaitanyam eva. Chaitanyam tu Trividam. Pramatra Chaitanyam, Pramana Chaitanyam, Prameya Chaitanyam. Pramatra Chaitanyam tavata Sakshi. Tatu Antakaranam eva. That is the Antakarana, inner faculty. Not the Antaramana like Nayayikas and Dvaita Vedantins and Vishishta Dvaita Vedantins propose. Not that one. It's the, so in their case, that is, there is Pramata, that is the soul, is connected with Antaramana. That is the 5 mano prabheda. No, the manaha itself is pramata here. Then pramana chaitanya, that is antakarana parinama. Then there is prameya chaitanya, that is the bahirartha or antarartha. This is a different epistemological diagram that the Advaita has proposed here. Okay, fine. Now here, this pramatri chaitanyam is what is sakshi. Now what happens, because yada vidya vilasena bhuta bhautika srishtayaha, I have considered that I exist, whereas I is that something else. But what I have done, I have considered that I is different from that supreme I, and I exist. It's because of avidya vilasa, because of ajnana adhyasa. So some people also in Advaita, some modern scholars, traditional modern scholars, not modern scholars, have also, like people like Dr. Nirmalya Goa and others, also consider ajnana as a very important ontological concept of Advaita, even though it might, for apparently, not literally, apparently defeat the Advaita stance of being a monist one, but here their interpretations are different. There are a lot of scholars in that who have that perspective, even in traditional world. Now, that because of avidya, I has become pramata. That is nothing but manaha. That pramatra chaitanya through pramana chaitanya becomes prameya chaitanya. This is what internal modification means. What does that mean? See, a very interesting example is what we can take up to the reference of the stagnant water and the flowing water that was referred to in the chair's remarks. So, you have a dam and the dam gates are closed. Now you open the dam, the water comes out and it takes the shape of the river size, the river body, and it becomes the river. And this, what is inside the dam, okay, that is the chaitanya, okay, and through pramana, antakarana parinama, because of the canal, the shape of the canal, the door, the water, even though before the water body, the whole body shape was totally different, but here it took the shape of something like Indriya and is coming and becoming the object. Okay, so the consciousness is becoming the object. That is why it is considering itself distinct from the object. Whereas that the object does not exist, this does not exist. What exists? The Nirguna Atma exists. Now this is what is Advaita's perception. That is, no one has presented perception in this way. Interestingly, Advaita also says that for Vyavaharika Prapancha, Pratyakṣa is Prama. But when it comes to Paramarthika Satya, Pratyakṣa, because in case of Swapna, in case of Shukti Rarita and other cases, Pratyakṣa has been deceptive. Pratyakṣa is not trustworthy always. But until we produce, that is why this whole, at the beginning only, was Samsara Dashayam to A Brahma Jnana Paryantam Etat Sarvam epistemology. Brahma Jnana, the moment it contributes to Brahma Paroksha Jnana, then these do not have any kind of validity at all, because they are producing a different kind of knowledge. In ultimate reality, it is not the case. So what happens is that it becomes the object. The pramata, the manaha, through pramana, that is antakarana parinama, antakarana, through antakarana parinama becomes prameya. That is what he says. Now this, see, there is a space in this room, and in my hand also there is space, so that I can keep the phone. So this room space and this my hand space, are they different? So there is no difference between any of these chaitanyas, is what he proposes. Now, then he goes on defining what is Pratyakṣa, and then there are a lot of Ativyapti, Avyapti, Asambhava and so on, which have been addressed in the Vedānta paribhāṣā text. There are a lot of translations. Many of these translations may not be, in many cases, completely appropriate, but it is, see, German language, French language, have reached around the world, in Korean world, in Japanese world, in Chinese world, in Arabic world. They have been read by these scholars. Similarly, it's a time for Sanskrit philosophical traditions also to outreach. So there has to be an attempt. Not only the Sanskrit texts are translated within. Anuvada means it's not in another language in Sanskrit. Shastra Anuvada means you do it in Sanskrit only. It has to be reproduced in Sanskrit as well as all the other languages, including the Indic and non-Indic languages. So in that case, this attempt of trying to present them in English might have a lot of problems, but I would like to say the same what Raghavendra Tirtha says. Jnanabdirapyavadityat kalatvam swatmanastada mandana madrishanam kim tad vacham kshamyanta tadbudaha. Even Jnanabdi, great saints and scholars have themselves said that they might have committed mistakes in their interpretation. So mandana madrishanam kim tad vacham kshamyanta tadbudaha. So I think I have exceeded my time limit. So I would like to stop here and then have interaction with you all. Matprerakena harina ya puja sasyakarita bhagyagna rupa lakshmi sha taya prinatu keshavaha. I have tried my best to summarize and also take line by line in many cases. Hope that has been successful. Thank you. Krishnarpanam.
Thank you very much, sir, for that detailed exposition of the text. Now, with the permission of the chair, we shall proceed to a brief discussion.
Yeah. Andre, proceed with your question. Please on your screen.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Hi, sir. Thank you for a very insightful presentation. I have a few qualms, specifically in the section when you were talking about Abhishek, because at least to my minimal understanding, Abhishek is used as a predicate, right? Abhishek has some sort of ritualistic function, specifically in Buddhism, maybe on occasion in Mimamsakas. But the way you were talking about Abhishek, it seemed to be in some sort of context of self-examination. In the context, you were kind of also mentioning Descartes in the same bracket of your discussion, talking about how it might carry some sort of ontological baggage. So I was wondering, what is your meaning and use of Abhishek? Do you use it as a predicate? Do you use it in a different sense? So I was wondering if you can please clarify that.
Just a minute, just give me a minute. I think I could not hear certain words that you said. Maybe that's I have tried to increase my volume and also avoid all other disturbances. Can you repeat precisely? I have missed certain.
Sure. Yeah, so you were mentioning the word Abhishek, and it was in the context
What
of Abhishek.
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 Vishaya, huh?
Well, okay, maybe I completely misunderstood what. I'll just type it in chat, because I thought you were talking about Abhishek, right?
Sir, it is Anadigada Abadida Abhishek Jnanam while you
Abhishayaka. Yeah.
Yeah, because to my minimal understanding, that is a predicate. I wasn't sure, but the way you were talking about the word, it seemed to carry like an infinitive connotation or something along those lines. You were mentioning the word in the context of Descartes and cogitative conditions of recognizing the self and how the self interacts with the external world. So I was wondering, how exactly are you using that word, and what speech act is it to you?
Okay, somewhere I have failed to understand your question. If I'm not wrong, please correct me. So, see, Vishaya means content, okay, Artha. So, Vishaya refers to Artha. Now, what happens is that I am here and this object is here. Let me take help of Buddhism. So, I will try to confluence all these Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Nyaya, Buddhism and Advaita. So, it's very helpful. Those who are scholars, you may please try to separate them and try to understand. Now, this is object. This object is different from the object that is here. That is why in Buddhism they call it Bauddhaha Arthaha. Arthaha Bauddhaha Vijnanavadi Mate. Even in Vyakarana also the similar interpretation that is there. Now what does that mean? Is that this object, if you look at from Dharma Dharmi Bhava, that is Adhara Adeya Bhava, the Adhara is this, the substrate is this, and the resident Adeya is this. This object is here. Now I have this object. How do I know that it is here? Because Nyayamata. This object, light is there, light reflected on this object like science, and this object I could perceive, like this object was reflected into my eyes saw it. Now there is a problem with Nyaya's interpretation. That is why Advaita says, this is what, when I was doing my bachelor's final year, I had studied under Goda Venkataramana Shastri. This is what he has explained then. Here the problem is the object is a static object. How can it go inside my head? So what Advaita says, Antakarana Parinama, that is why it says that it is object is, because it is Manaha is Dravya, Dravana Prapya. Manaha is Dravya, Dravana Prapya, so it can come and connect with the outside world. Now this is Chaitanya Rupa Dravya, not just a simple Dravya. Now Manaha is connecting with this object and it is being reflected. It's once this Manaha becomes this, like the Tatakodaka example that Vedānta Dharmarājā has given, there is an aikya between the water that is outside the in the canal or in the river and inside the reservoir. Similarly, here both these, the pramatra, that is antakarana, that is manaha, through pramana is becoming prameya. So it is becoming the object itself is what vishayatvam means. That is what तथा च तत्तदिन्द्रिय योग्य वर्तमान विषयावच्छिन्न चैतन्याभिन्नत्वं तत्तदाकार वृत्त्यावच्छिन्न ज्ञानस्य तत्तदंशे प्रत्यक्षत्वम्. In Madhavananda's translation, it is page number 25. So this is what he is pointing out here. So Vṛttya वर्तमान विषयावच्छिन्न चैतन्याभिन्नत्वं तत्तदाकार वृत्त्यावच्छिन्न चैतन्य ज्ञानस्य तत्तदंशे प्रत्यक्षत्वम्. This is Advaita. Now here the difference in Advaita, it is the same jnana. In Vyavaharika Dasha, it is the same jnana that is becoming Vishaya. In Nyaya, this content, this Vishaya is here. What I have is Vasana Rupa Artha. That is in the form of mental tendency, what I have there inside. It is a mental tendency and it is not the object, because if I close, I can still imagine, create, recreate, or recall your face. I can call when I see you, I can recall your face when I close my eyes. Then if the object is not there inside, you are not sitting in my head. If the object is not there inside, it has to be Manasa Rupa, Vasana Rupa. This is Nyaya conception and also Dvaita conception. Now Advaita says, what you consider as there is Vasana Artha, and then you are considering that there is Bhautika Artha. That Bhautika Artha, Bhuta Bhautika Srishtaya, that Bhautika, Bhuta Padartha is Avidya Vilasa. It is nothing but that the Manasa Rupa Vasana only is coming outside and you are perceiving it as an object that is there. This is what their conception of Vishaya Vishayi Bhava. So the Vishaya is the object, Vishayi is the Jnana. There is, that is what he said. Now the text got closed, I'm sorry. So there is abheda between these two objects. And this has not been cognized earlier. Even if it has been cognized in many cases, whether in the serial cognition or another cognition, Kshana Vishesha Vishaya, Vartamana Vishaya, that part is not cognized before. So it's Anadigata only all the time. So it's Abhadita in Samsara Dasha, it's Anadigata because there is a lot of other inputs that are seen in that cognition, and this becomes the cognitive content. That means Vishaya. And this Vishaya is what is called Prameya Chaitanya in case of Aproksha Jnana. And that Prameya Chaitanya is nothing but the Pramata, that is the Manaha itself becoming the object. So there is Abheda between these two. This is what Advaita has proposed. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, that was helpful, but the mental representation doesn't alter the way the external object works and the ontology of the external object. Even if you can internalize, the visual field, right? This is the phone. So what I actually do is I generate that pictorial representation, that mana, right? That still doesn't have any causal implications for what the outside object is and how any sort of functionality. So how do you ensure that the mana is always corresponding in full with all the possible functional aspects of an external object?
Okay. I'm sorry, it's difficult. You are asking a realist question to a person who's by practitioner realist. Okay. Now the thing is that epistemological realism I'm referring to. Now, by training for 15 years, and the important is the last significant 6 to 9 years, my training is purely Nyaya and Dvaita. So even for me, this has been a strong question that isn't that there is a difference between the Manasa Padartha and the external object. This is your question, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. But let me try to it is your ajnana, so I'm sorry, it is your ajnana, that is why you are able to, so this does not limit here, because we have to go back to inference and a lot of other cognitions to respond to this from the Advaita perspective. But to put it very simple, what happens, I will give you one example. If you eat a sugar candy in Makara Sankranti in Karnataka in the mid-January, when they celebrate Makara Sankranti, they give this called Sakre Bella, Sakre Achu, which is nothing but the kids and all they get in the confectionery store, that the sugar idol, where the object, you eat a leg and you consider that you have eaten the leg of the object. You call it a leg, but it is not actually a leg. It's nothing but sugar candy itself. It's given, it is in elephant shape. The sugar candy is in a human shape. It's in varied versions. But what actually they are all nothing but the sugar candy themselves. What we are doing is that I will present you a stronger case of sociological sense. See, we have this sexual differences, racial differences, a lot of other differences that have created a lot of barricades. Why? Because we are perceiving them to be different. In what sense they are different? Okay, so this is the Navya Vedanta perspective. So what sense they are different? They are nothing but humans. Now we create this difference because we are defining constantly every object. Okay, we are constantly defining every object. Now this animate world, again, if you go to this level, the animate world and the inanimate world, can they be one? This is the Sankhya's point of view. They cannot be one because they too have totally different function. Yes, because we do not have that Brahmajnana, we consider it as to be two different things. But the Brahmajnana and the Vedanta Jnana, Vedanta are very explicitly have proposed this idea of the identity between the animate world and the inanimate world. So this is the topic of that vichara. Until we are clear with the Vedanta text, Vedanta Jnana, Vedanta Artha Avalambini Paribhāṣā, we will not be able to understand that this animate and inanimate are the same. Now what you perceive as different from animate, that is you alone, one with no differences, is when you do not have differences, but still you are perceiving differences within yourself. Like that, you are perceiving differences within the external world. This is a very lay response to your question, because it's a little tricky question to answer. And the whole debate lies in Nyayamrita and Advaita Siddhi of Vyasatirtha and Madhusudana Saraswati.
Lovely discussion. Let me intervene. See, what I see is unless you adopt a phenomenological position, you will not understand Advaita Vedanta. See, the whole debate is, as Srini has rightly represented, how is it that consciousness takes the form of the world? And in Drigdrishya Viveka, and the small Prakarana Grantha, he speaks about how the Drik travels through the channels and then creates the apparent Drishya for himself, and then either troubled or enjoys the world that he has created, as he has rightly said, through Ajnana. And then he speaks about, the systematic withdrawal of the consciousness. It is like folding back what has been spread out through, by the consciousness. He has used the analogy of candy. The standard examples are, gold. See, I think I have used the example in Nalanda also, like the same object, a gold bangle. What has been perceived? See, I see it, my daughter sees it when she was very young. She says, Amma, there is a bangle that has been kept. She doesn't see the gold factor because it's not important for her. She just sees a bangle. And for me, it is a bangle because I wear the bangle, and it is also gold because I know that it is precious. But for my husband, who doesn't have anything to do with the bangle aspect, if I were to keep the bangle somewhere carelessly, say, why have you kept the gold here? See, he doesn't see the bangle factor at all. It is just the gold. The same entity, when it has been perceived differently, has been, as he has used the analogy of candy, the same entity. So it is as to the level, the world, the vyavaharika, paribhāṣika, or the pratibhāṣika, that you understand and define the object. As you get back the spread, Nagarjuna also says the same thing. How, the very first sloka, I'm talking about Andre. If you remember Mula Madhyamaka Karika, where he speaks about, how, like a magician creating the world, consciousness creates the world for itself. So, my point is that, well, you both were engaged in the beautiful argument of how the Vishaya gets distinct, whether the Vishaya is mental, and how the mental object being distinct from the physical object. So this whole debate gets reduced once you adopt the phenomenological method. And if you don't adopt the phenomenological method, you will not understand the Advaita Vedanta. So this is all that I wanted to ask, intervene. And Srini, like when you were speaking about the reservoir analogy, a small doubt, like, I don't know, probably I'm wrong, but then doesn't it refute the Shruti? For instance, Mandukya Upanishad, the seventh mantra, I have been obsessed with the seventh mantra now, where it is said, Na anda pratyam, na bhishpratyam, na pratyana ghana, na pratyana ghana. No, na anda pratyam, na bhishpratyam, no bhayada pratyam, na pratyana ghanam, which means it is the intense consciousness. Where I think this consciousness, there is some term that Vasubandhu uses to speak about the reservoir consciousness. What is that? Do you remember, Andre? What is the term Vasubandhu uses? I have taught you in Nalanda.
It's the Alaya Vijñān. In the Alaya Vijñān.
Yeah. Alaya Vijñāna, kind of.
Yeah. That's where Vasubandhu says that it's the eighth type of consciousness.
Where you have the storehouse of consciousness. So this kind of storehouse consciousness, can it be compared to this reservoir kind? And if that is the case, doesn't it refute Shruti? Yes, Srini.
Okay.
Was it clear?
The question was clear. I would like to first state my unfamiliarity with the Shruti part, but certain refuge that we have to keep in mind is that a lot of examples that have been taken by Advaita in these texts are apparently, not literally, but apparently they are all defeating the Advaita purpose. Like for example, if you look at the example of the Tadagodakam Chidrat Nirgatya Kedaram Pravishya Kedarakaram Parinamate. Now here, what the point that actually the point what he is trying to tell here is very interesting one is, let's not look at the molecular level and all and then say take Dvaita supposition and say that water and this water are two different things if you take in 2 volumes of glass. Isn't it water? If it was not water, if we are not, all of us are humans, how would you refer to us as humans? Okay. Now, you might have Aupadika Bheda, but to be honest, no one is going to defeat us that we are not men, all of us are not men or women, even though there is stark distinction. Put together, they are humans, they are animals. So at one point of time, if you look at all of us, all these small little deviations that exist are all only for your transactional purposes. But in pure sense, if you look at all of us, we are capable of performing almost similar tasks, almost a lot of similarity. So in this sense, unless these small little deviations, in all possible sense, that is nothing but, and in case of at least in case of water, if you taste this end of the field or the canal or the river or the reservoir, everything is just nothing but the same taste, the water itself. So how can you call that these two are entirely two different things? In that sense, to establish this form of identity, he has used it as an example. So that doesn't mean that it's nahi drishtante sarvasamyam. Everything will be literally the same. So he has used for our better comprehension purpose, he has used it.
Right. Yeah, even I think that my only worry is that the storehouse consciousness, which has been used in Abhidhamma theory of Buddhism, has not been accepted in Advaita Vedanta. And so my worry was how the storehouse consciousness has been adopted by Vedanta paribhāṣā. But then, as you have rightly said, nahi drishtane sarvasamam. Yeah, that's right. Any other question? Are there further questions? Yeah, please.
I have one more question.
Please
Oh,
do.
sorry, somebody else?
No. Go ahead. So
Okay.
far, no.
So when you were talking about kalajnana, right, this idea that we don't infer time, that the human apprehension of time is free from inferential content. It's somehow antecedent or epistemic representations of time precede any sort of conceptual content, right? That's what you were trying to say. So
you perceive the time. It's not you infer the time, you perceive the time.
Yeah.
Because
so
if not, in your lingual interaction with the object, see, whether you are speaking to someone else or you are speaking to yourself, or you don't have to speak, but in your cognition has an akara. That akara is mostly in the form of language, in the lingual expression. So whatever, what is language? Language is nothing but knowledge representation. Knowledge itself is represented in the form of language. So if that representation has an element, and that element is not like, there is no reason for you to have the Vyapya Vyapaka Bhava, then how can you consider that one is pervaded and then because it is pervaded, there will be the pervader time. You do not have that kind of concomitance there. You have an instant, immediate cognition of the object that it is there. It is. So you're not looking at even if you are looking at it was or it is going to be, you are always looking at the object with the time. So in that sense, the time is perceived.
But I just don't understand why this makes sense, because it's like I look at this object without me cognizing time. There's a sense of atemporality here. My mind, however subtle or material or whatever your favorite philosophical position is, I can look at this object and cognize its pictorial representation without cognizing time. I'm not thinking I'm seeing the phone at T1, then I'm seeing the phone at T2, then I'm seeing the phone at T3 and whatever else. So I'm not sure why is temporal cognition necessary here for me to embed a representation of an object?
It's like, Andre, it's quite like Immanuel Kant saying that space and time, they're presupposed. Without that, you cannot have the perception. So quite like categories, the forms of intuition, if you remember. So they're there. And here, I mean, it is quite not identical to what Immanuel Kant says, but here, when you speak about the Dharmarājā jnana, the continuing cognitions, in order to address this, as Srini has beautifully explained, then how do you account for a continuing event? And in order to resolve this issue, they speak about the temporal perception. Perceptions are necessarily temporal. Right, Srini?
Okay.
Perceptions are necessarily temporal. Right?
And also very interesting, now let me, because Dvaita Vedanta also considered as Kala as Sakshi Vidya, though Nayayika considered it as Saksha as Anumeya. Now look at this interesting aspect that the whole Vedanta uses to criticize Samanya. According to Nayayika, the Samanya, that is, it is...
Samanya is generality. He might not know all the technical terms.
Okay, Samanya is universal. So when you look, see, I have a nephew, and my sister is a software automated testing software engineer. So she used to get all new phones, and she used to have his videos. So without knowing any of these distinct, completely different technicalities, different configuration, different phones, different companies, different mix, everything completely different. But in all these gadgets, he used to go to exactly to the video section, the gallery, multimedia, without knowing the language. 3-4-year-old kid. He used to play the video. Okay, he used to play the video of his own, and if it was someone else, he would not play. Now, how come of the future, whenever the occasion arises, how he is able to perceive that? How the child is able to do that? So the human cognition works like this. Unless you perceive the universal, you are not able to account for it. How you perceive the universal? When you look at the object, you look at what is this? This is pen. What is this called? This is called pen. So you don't have to use the word as, but this is called as pen. So when you are using the word as or like, you are actually referring to the in Indian languages, in Hindi karke and in Kannada anta and all. So you literally use in Indic languages, you use the universal in your lingual representation only. Now, how this universal is being though universal you cannot see, it's a metaphysical category, it's not physical category. But according to Nayayika, that it is being perceived. Okay. Now, even Dharmarājā sarcastically criticizes Evameva Samavayaha Upaditvam Sarvamapi Nirasaniyam. He will tell that interestingly. He says that all this what you call Samanya, that is what we have been calling Abheda. And then when we call Abheda, you have problems with it. And when you call it Samanya, you are fine with it. And how come your Abheda stands? So this is a Dharmarājā's direct criticism against Nayayika's Samanya for proposing his Veda. Dvaitins are tropists, they are not universalists. So they have a different response. There is a different position that they take. So for them, it's Pratyakṣa Dharma. Now look at universal. When you perceive the object, I only perceive the object and its features, the qualities and so on. But according to Nayayika, yena indriyena ya vyakti grihyate tenaiva indriyena tanishta jatihi tadabhavascha grihyate. So abhava is not perceived according to Advaita through Pratyakṣa. It is artha anupalabdhi jnana gamya. Because if not, then I have to perceive everyone's abhava here in front of me. It's not possible. But according to Nayayika, samanya and abhava is Pratyakṣa gamya. But just it is their metaphysical categorization and then their interpretation of that, that we assume that it is perceived. Actually, I have to admit that there is a problem with me, is that whenever I'm speaking of Advaita, all Nyaya criticism against Advaita and Dvaita criticism Advaita is coming to my head. So I have to somehow try to keep that criticism out and speak. It's very difficult. I'm struggling. So, but it's not actually difficult to imagine. Okay. So even if we have different epistemological position. So when you are looking at the object, even though universal, no one, if you go to a shopkeeper and tell you have a fruit, do you see appleless in the apple? That person will say, I have only apple. If you want, you buy it. Okay. So appleless is never perceived by that individual unless Nayayika injects that into our head. We are totally never aware of that point. Now, because of this, what we are considering appleless is perceived, whereas it's not perceived. It doesn't exist, first of all, because it's just apple and it's abheda with its features. It's just identical. Now, similarly, what we have been told that what object that you have in front of you, that the sun and sea, the celestial bodies and the seasons, the climates, and the clock in your wall or your wrist. So looking at them, we have been trained to tell that that is helping us to infer. Because of that training, we are unable to see, we are living at the moment. This can be one simple explanation, but it has problems. This explanation has problems, I admit.
Yeah.
Maybe if we listen to lectures from staunch Advaita scholars like Vidwan Mani Dravida Shastri and so on, we will be able to respond even much better. And a lot of Advaita texts, if we have read, adequate.
Yeah.
There's a long way
I'm
to go.
also not persuaded by universals. I'm just as much of a tropist as your average Vedantist is. I think that universals are just false Platonic categories that don't actually exist. But what is the Advaitist response to the Kshanikavada doctrine of the Buddhists? Because that's how Buddhists explain at least conventional perceptions of time, as far as I'm concerned, right? They talk about these like innumerably many ongoing layers and sequences of visual representations which give us a sense of time. That's what they would call a conventional perception that is temporally kind of shaping our world.
Actually,
is there a
one
classical response to Kshanikavada, ma'am, or sir?
Yeah, he understood what is
Okay,
Kshanikavada.
So actually, when I'm teaching one for this integrated master's program in management studies. The students who are studying BBA and MBA, for them I do a course on introduction to philosophy. There, one student had raised this interesting point that I've never thought of. So while speaking about metaphysics, the student had said this, that it was a discussion on whether there is a self or not. So the student said that there is no, I mean, the discussion went in a different direction, but this aspect of the discussion is that when we look at if you have an electronic gadget, okay, so what do you actually call as computer?
Srini, the question is not Nairatmyavada, it is Kshanikavada that he is asking.
That's what. So, yeah. So what actually is computer? So you are looking at conglomeration of different physical objects and attributing it to be one. Okay. Now this is the criticism that the Vedantins also can use, or they have used it differently, but this criticism is very simple one. See, what Buddhist says, that you have a mango in your hand, you brought it from the shop, or a banana which was different in color. Every second you can look at, if you have this 5-minute craft videos and all, which are very well presence, the momentarity of all these objects, the momentariness of all these objects, it's very well represented in these kind of audiovisual representation. But actually, when you are saying that the constantly what you are looking at it is the same object, your whole intellectual disposition, your whole interaction with that object, even though the physically this which one is computer is going to be very difficult question for us to answer, but you are at a collective entity, you are looking at it, even though it might have variations of temporal changes on that object, but nowhere in your human experience you have denied that this is not the mango that I brought. The shape, the color, the size, everything changes, but never the object itself. When you eat today and you keep it tomorrow and eat it again, you are going to tell that this is the part of the same mango that I ate yesterday, and the same mango has changed its color and taste and size. But you are never going to tell that that mango is different and this mango is different. So the kshanikatvam is there. Kshanikatvam is in kshana. Every kshana the object exists. So the object does not exist independently, it exists kshana vishishta. So this is what also, even if I'm referring to Professor Shrikala rightly, she said that the space and time, you perceive it with the object. So when you are looking it with the object, every second that the second is changing and the molecular structure is changing. Just the molecular structure, does it make a very different object? Is one question that the Vedantins have posed, which counter a problem which we can also look at from the ship of Theseus allegory. So is it the same ship of Theseus, or it's totally a different ship of Theseus? So in that sense, if we try to look at these two cases side by side, it's very difficult to defeat Buddhism in one sense, but according to Vedanta, it's not the object that is being changed. Even though object undergoes change, but doesn't become totally a different object. Milk can become curd or even can become clarified butter, but the clay can become clay spoon and then the clay pot, but doesn't mean that the clay and the pot are two different things. Vacharambanam vikaro namadeyam Vṛtti satyam. So it's the same object that is there. So it is not actually an independent object that has been produced as Buddhists conceive. It is the same object that is there. This is the Vedanta's response.
Okay.
And the focus is always on the consciousness. And the focus is how the consciousness attempts on constructing rather than the spread world. So you will have to, quite like to Andre, it is quite like Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka thought. Actually, Vedantins, particularly Advaita Vedantins, as he is famously been criticized for Prachanna, a lot of, you see it in Mandukya Karika and later in Shankara, and Shankara was very, very smartly has placed them as, Pradhanamallas, and because he was pretty aware that his own thesis is quite alike that of Madhyamakas, so he placed them as one of his staunch opponents, and he went on criticizing. But nevertheless, we must, it's very easy to understand Advaita Vedanta. If you are a Bauddha, it is very easy to understand. And if you have troubles in understanding Advaita Vedanta, seek the help of Nagarjuna and then you will understand it in no time. So that's it. Any other question? If not, please, let's wind it. Over to Ramya. Ramya, are you there?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the beautiful discussion. Now, may I request you, ma'am, to kindly
Yeah, I will. On behalf of the International School for Sri Shankaracharya Studies, I profusely thank Dr. Srinivasa Acharya for having delivered this beautiful talk. And as I was keenly looking at him, like I think, one of my observations is that his brain works too fast. And the language, of course, language is what you say. It's the word, as Sri Harsha says in Khandana Khandagatiya. Yeah, Maya is nothing but the language. So language is conceptual, it is immediate, and therefore it takes time. So he was trying to immediately communicate what his thoughts, as I see, the struggle of converting the language, the thoughts into language was visible. So probably as the science develops, we could, make this bridge between the thought and the language, and then as we think, probably we can also communicate so that there is no time gap between the thought and the language. It is wonderful to have Srinivasa Acharya with us, and on behalf of International School for Sri Shankaracharya Studies, I thank you and look forward for your continued cooperation with us. And I also look forward for further discussions, because vade vade jayate tatra bodha. So unless we debate, nothing grows here. And once again, the river analogy. Let's bring back the flow in the water, and that is all that we need to do. Because as to borrow the analogy of Dharmarājā, there is a lot of water in the reservoir. So, and it will flow also. All that we need to do is, instill the vega, the flow of the water. And all these exercises are meant to either retain the flow or to increase the flow, increase the momentum of the flow. So thank you all, particularly to Andre, who has richly contributed for the discussion. And I also thank my colleague, Professor Shiva, who has introduced the speaker. So once again, thank you, Sriniji, for having delivered this beautiful. Thank you so much.
Narayan. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all, and good night.